It wasn't a battlefield, at least not officially. But for the men who entered that swamp, it might as well have been. In Southern Comfort, 9 weekend soldiers step into the Louisiana bayou with rifles loaded with blanks, orders they don't understand, and an arrogance that evaporates with every mile. There's no declared enemy, no mission, just rising dread. And in the silence between footsteps, something ancient waits. Directed by Walter Hill and released in 1981, Southern Comfort presents itself as a survival story, but that's misdirection. Beneath its muddy boots and rusted guns lies something far more unnerving, a slow, deliberate breakdown of order. Some critics saw it as a metaphor for Vietnam. Others saw a parable about masculinity, nationalism, and the illusion of control. Hill denied it all, but the film kept whispering back. Filmed in real swampland under brutal conditions, the shoot mirrored the story it told. Crews waded through leech-filled water, equipment failed, tempers snapped, and in the chaos, boundaries blurred. Between actor and character, set and wilderness, control and collapse. Decades later, it remains one of the most quietly disturbing films of its time, not because of what it shows, but because of how deeply it reflects something we don't want to see. The enemy is never named, the violence is never explained, and survival feels less like victory and more like delay. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Southern Comfort, a film where the blanks weren't the only thing that lacked power. Fact 1. They fired real bullets at a living target. When Southern Comfort blurred the line between fiction and reality, it wasn't always metaphorical. One particular sequence crossed into ethically dangerous territory: the shooting of a live wild hog on camera. Though the film's central conceit involved soldiers armed with blanks, this scene was anything but staged. According to former crew members, a real boar was used, corralled into a controlled set piece, and when the time came, actual ammunition was loaded. One actor pulled the trigger, the animal dropped, the camera never stopped. Hill defended the moment as necessary authenticity, claiming it captured the chaos and confusion of men facing nature's violence. But not everyone on set agreed. Some crew reportedly walked away from the monitor in protest. Others whispered about insurance concerns and legal gray areas. It wasn't just shocking, it was deliberate. The footage made the final cut. No warning, no context, just a flash of brutality that lingers, not for its gore, but for its intent. Was it art, survivalist realism, or just a director pushing past one line too many? Either way, that scene is real, and so is the blood. Fact 2. The cast reached their breaking point in silence. The swamp didn't just test the characters, it nearly broke the people playing them. Walter Hill believed discomfort built performance, so when the actors began showing signs of exhaustion, he didn't intervene. Insects swarmed their faces, cold mud soaked their boots. Days began at sunrise and ended without warmth or reprieve, and Hill kept the cameras rolling. Fred Ward, who'd played tough roles before, reportedly snapped after a freezing overnight shoot. Keith Carradine withdrew, speaking less between takes. Powers Booth kept to himself unshaven, intense, eerily in character, even when the scene ended. The tension became so thick that a production assistant allegedly quit on the spot, citing uncontrolled hostility. One minor actor was replaced quietly after refusing to continue without additional safety measures. But the replacements weren't treated any differently. The swamp demanded the same toll. Ironically, none of this chaos had to be faked. The growing paranoia, the breakdowns, the mistrust, it's all in the final cut. Hill didn't have to direct fear. He just let it happen. Sometimes, the best performances come from actors who stop pretending they're safe. Fact 3. Everyone saw Vietnam, except the director. From its first screenings, Southern Comfort was seen as a parable of America's failure in Vietnam. The arrogant soldiers, the cultural misunderstanding, the invisible threat, it was all there. Everyone saw it. Everyone, it seemed, except Walter Hill. The director pushed back hard. "This is a story about survival," he told reporters, "not war." But the parallels were difficult to dismiss. A group of men armed with the wrong tools, marching through hostile terrain, misreading every signal until it's too late. The echoes were deafening. Even the use of blanks, weapons with all the sound, but none of the impact felt like pointed commentary on ineffective power. Critics called it one of the most unflinching post-war statements of the decade. Hill insisted that was projection. The studio stayed silent. In later years, cast members admitted they saw the connection during filming. One called it a war film without uniforms. Another said, "We weren't making a metaphor, we were living in one." Hill never revised his stance, but maybe he didn't need to. Because when a film feels like war, it doesn't matter if you meant it that way. Fact 4. The villains were mute, and that was no accident. In a film full of confusion, the most unnerving silence came from the Cajun hunters. Throughout Southern Comfort, they remain almost entirely voiceless, not from lack of actors, but by design. Early drafts of the screenplay included dialogue, warnings, taunts, even broken English exchanges. But Walter Hill made a deliberate revision. He stripped the lines, reducing the pursuers to silhouettes and sound cues. Whistles replaced language. Eyes replaced threats. It was a conscious erasure to make them unknowable. Some saw this as brilliance. Others viewed it as problematic, reducing an entire culture to faceless menace. But Hill's goal wasn't realism, it was dread. And nothing unsettles more than danger that doesn't explain itself. Ironically, this creative decision caused problems during editing. Several scenes had to be restructured to remove reaction shots that made no narrative sense without spoken context. Voice actors were hired and then cut. Even the sound design was modified to deepen the silence. And it worked. The Cajuns don't just stalk, they haunt. By refusing to humanize them, Hill turned them into something worse. Not enemies, but inevitabilities. And in this film, fear doesn't speak. It watches. Fact 5. The ending was a fight between chaos and closure. The conclusion of Southern Comfort is a fever dream. Two soldiers, battered and blood-soaked, wander into a Cajun celebration. There's music, food, and smiling strangers. After a film of hostility, it feels wrong. And that was intentional. Originally, the script had a violent finale, gunfire, a final confrontation, perhaps even a rescue. But Hill didn't want resolution. He wanted dissonance. A moment that made audiences question whether they were watching peace or just another trap. The studio hated it. Test viewers were confused. Executives demanded changes. Hill refused. After weeks of back and forth, a compromise was reached. The confrontation would be filmed, but not used. Instead, ambient chaos would mask the threat. The music would be joyful but eerie. The camera would linger on faces unsure, unreadable. No explosion, no closure, just noise. To this day, the ending divides viewers. Some call it brilliant. Others call it incomplete. But its discomfort lingers. Because sometimes, the scariest moment isn't the fight, it's realizing the fight might never end. Fact 6. Fred Ward bled for real and kept going. Fred Ward never liked shortcuts, so when it came to physical stunts, he insisted on doing them himself. He trained, rehearsed, and jumped into the swamp like a soldier until the swamp hit back. During one early morning shoot, Ward had to charge across slick mud and leap into shallow water. What the crew didn't see was a jagged branch beneath the surface. Ward landed hard and came up bleeding from his shin, not a scrape, a gash. Production paused. Medics offered assistance. Ward waved them off. He wrapped his leg with tape, covered it with costume gear, and finished the scene. Multiple takes. No complaint. No delay. The footage made it into the film, his grimace, his limp, the splash of water hiding a flicker of red. It wasn't dramatics, it was instinct. Ward later said, "The camera was rolling, that's all that mattered." His injury wasn't reported to insurance. The studio never acknowledged it. But every time that scene plays, one question remains. Was that performance? Or was that pain? Fact 7. Keith Carradine held it together until he couldn't. Walter Hill cast Keith Carradine for one reason: control. Carradine had a reputation for restraint, calm, measured, precise. In a film about unraveling, Hill needed an actor who could stay centered. And for a while, Carradine did exactly that. But Southern Comfort didn't shoot in order. Scenes were scrambled, nights blended into days, locations shifted with the tides. One moment, Carradine was delivering dry lines. The next, he was wading through muck with no clear direction. That structure or lack of it began to wear him down. One specific night pushed him to the brink. The crew was shooting a tense river crossing. The boat was unbalanced, overloaded, and the water was colder than expected. Carradine slipped. Not in the script. Cameras kept rolling. He surfaced, coughing, eyes wide, and Hill used the take. After that, Carradine changed. He spoke less. He stood apart during breaks. Some thought it was method, others thought it was fatigue. But on screen, it added a strange stillness, not passive, but watchful, haunted. Carradine never complained. But that performance? It didn't feel rehearsed. It felt like someone trying not to fall apart. Fact 8. The soundtrack was designed to unsettle you without you knowing. The bayou in Southern Comfort isn't just a backdrop, it's a character. And its voice isn't in the dialogue, but in the sound. From echoing whistles to unnatural animal calls, the soundscape wasn't ambient. It was intentional. Sound designer Alan Splett known for his work with David Lynch, didn't just record swamp noises. He bent them. Bird calls were reversed. Frog croaks were slowed down. Metal clanks were added beneath footsteps. Whistles were layered with faint tones just below audible range. The result? A sound design that makes you uneasy without knowing why. Viewers couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. They just felt it like being watched, or followed, or trapped. One particular trick involved embedding heartbeat rhythms into background noise. Subtle, indistinct, but enough to spike anxiety during key moments. Splet later described the process as building a sonic hallucination. You can't hear what's wrong, but your nerves do. And that's how you turn a swamp into a psychological weapon. Fact 9. They filmed in a restricted area and didn't tell the cast why. Location scouts found the perfect stretch of swamp, remote, atmospheric, and eerily quiet. What they failed to mention was that part of it had recently been closed off due to a livestock disease outbreak. Official signage had been taken down. The land had technically reopened, but locals still avoided it, warning of contaminated water and residual bacteria. Hill dismissed the warnings. The crew went in. Within days, 2 members of the team developed flu-like symptoms. Another had a rash up his legs that doctors couldn't trace. One assistant camera operator collapsed after vomiting on set. Production quietly adjusted bottled water only, no waiting unless necessary. But the damage was done. One actor allegedly refused to shoot in that location again, claiming the air tasted wrong. Hill told the press it was just part of the atmosphere. But the footage from those days has a distinct stillness, as if even nature had gone quiet. Sometimes, danger isn't visible, it's ambient, and in this case, it was already in the ground. Fact 10. Powers Booth wasn't the first choice. He was the last one willing. The role of Hardin demanded more than screen presence. It needed endurance. The character had to embody resilience, suspicion, and the slow erosion of trust, all while sinking in mud. Several actors were approached. One by one, they declined. Too physically demanding, too psychologically bleak, too much swamp. Then came Powers Booth. Fresh off an Emmy win, he wasn't looking for comfort, he was looking for risk. He signed on immediately. Booth didn't ease into the character. He entered like a shadow, silent, coiled, unreadable. Crew members noted how he rarely smiled between takes. Some wondered if he was angry. Others suspected he never stopped acting. In a cast full of breakdowns and emotional volatility, Booth became the controlled center. But that control wasn't peace. It was pressure, layered and waiting to crack. And when he finally does briefly, violently, it's one of the most memorable moments in the film. Not because it's loud, but because you weren't sure he was capable of it until he was. Sometimes, the quietest actor carries the loudest threat. Fact 11. The fog that made the film nearly took out the crew. The mist rolling across the swamp in Southern Comfort doesn't just set the mood, it swallows it. But the iconic fog wasn't natural. It was engineered, and it nearly caused a disaster. To maintain visual consistency, the crew used industrial fog machines powered by diesel generators. On most days, it worked. On one particularly humid shoot, it didn't. The chemical mist clung to the air longer than expected. It coated lenses, it coated trees, and, crucially, it crept into the generator's ventilation. Hours into the shoot, one unit overheated and burst into flames. The crew scrambled. The cast was evacuated. A fire extinguisher crew managed to contain it before it reached the sound rig. Filming was halted. A safety review was launched, but Hill insisted the fog return with tighter controls. The haze remained. So did the tension. Because in Southern Comfort, the air itself was a character one that didn't care if you could breathe. Fact 12. Marketing lied. Audiences didn't forgive it. When Southern Comfort was ready for release, the studio panicked. It wasn't an action film. It wasn't a slasher. It wasn't exactly horror. But executives needed a label, something to sell, so they picked violent. Posters featured rifles. Trailers showcased running, yelling, and guns firing. The tagline sounded like a war film. One weekend a year, the National Guard practices. This wasn't that weekend. It looked explosive. It wasn't. Audiences came expecting bloodshed and clear villains. What they got was ambiguity, dread, and slow-burn paranoia. Reactions were cold. Some left the theater visibly frustrated. Others muttered that it was about nothing. The film underperformed. Walter Hill never forgave the marketing team. He claimed they sabotaged the experience by misrepresenting what the film actually was. A study in breakdown, not battle. Over time, the film found its audience. Critics reevaluated it, scholars unpacked it, but the initial wound from that first false impression never fully closed. Because the wrong promise doesn't just ruin a film's release, it buries its meaning. Fact 13. A death scene wasn't in the script until Gravity wrote it. Accidents happen on sets. Most are hidden. One in Southern Comfort became part of the film. During a tense crossing scene, an actor lost his footing on a moss-covered log and plunged into the water. Cameras caught the fall. He resurfaced coughing, visibly shaken. Hill didn't yell cut. Instead, he stared at the playback and rewrote the scene. That character, originally meant to survive the sequence, now died. Off-screen, without warning, no dramatic send-off, no closure, just gone. A dissolve to the next moment. The actor was reportedly furious not because he'd been killed, but because his emotional buildup had been erased. His arc cut short by wet boots and bad timing. Hill, for his part, never apologized. The swamp decided, he said flatly, "I just listened." Viewers rarely notice the shift, but if you watch closely, you'll feel it. A missing face, a quiet absence, no fanfare. Sometimes, fiction doesn't imitate life. It just forgets to save you. Fact Hasson 4. The music was real Cajun, but something was off. The festival scene at the end of Southern Comfort is surreal. There's color, music, warmth, things the film had aggressively avoided. But listen carefully, and you'll notice something wrong with the sound. Off-key, uneven, almost warped. That's because the music was real, and then it wasn't. Hill hired local Cajun musicians to play live on set. Accordions, fiddles, washboards. The recordings were joyful, full of rhythm, too joyful, too grounded, too real. Enter sound designer Alan Splett. He took the raw tracks and began distorting them, slightly off-pitch, stretched tempos, reversed snippets layered in the background. What emerged was a version of Celebration that felt cursed. Some viewers couldn't explain why they felt uneasy. They blamed the lighting or the cuts, but it was the sound all along a party that didn't want you there. And when happiness feels haunted, the nightmare hasn't ended. It's wearing a mask. Fact Hasson 5. One country banned it but never explained why. While Southern Comfort passed U.S. censors without issue, at least one foreign nation refused to screen it. No press release, no statement, just a quiet rejection with the phrase, "political implications deemed inappropriate." Industry rumors point to either France or the Philippines, both with complex military histories. The problem wasn't the violence, it was the message, or more accurately, the ambiguity of the message. Was this a critique of American imperialism? A metaphor for internal collapse? A subtle dig at incompetent command structures? Whatever they saw, they didn't like it. Walter Hill, when asked, shrugged. If a movie with this few lines of dialogue can offend a government, maybe they were already nervous. The ban wasn't permanent. Years later, the film aired on state TV in a censored format with key scenes trimmed and no subtitles provided for Cajun French. It barely resembled the original, which raises the question. If a film has no clear politics, why did someone feel the need to silence it? Fact Hasson X. One actor's arc was erased overnight. In filmmaking, actors cling to narrative arcs like lifelines. It gives shape to chaos. For one performer in Southern Comfort, that shape vanished, not through death, but through deletion. Originally, this character was meant to survive. His journey was subtle, cowardice hardening into courage, the kind of arc that doesn't draw attention, but sticks in the memory. Then, mid-production, the call sheet changed. No warning, no ceremony. He would now vanish between scenes, never seen again, never mentioned. The actor protested. He'd built every beat with purpose. Hill listened, then shrugged. "It's more honest this way," the director reportedly said. "The absence plays almost invisibly. Most viewers don't catch it. But for those who do, the effect is chilling. A name gone from the roster, a face missing from formation, no blood, no resolution. It's not a mistake, it's a message." Sometimes, in war and on set, the worst fate isn't dying. It's being forgotten. Fact Hasson 7. Their uniforms were real, and so was the rot. To dress the cast, Hill's team didn't design costumes. They raided military surplus depots in the American South. Authenticity over aesthetics. What they got was real gear and real contamination. Many of the fatigues had been stored improperly, mildew, stained, sun-bleached, and infested with insects. One actor discovered mold growing in the collar. Another claimed his boots were still damp from someone else's sweat. Despite crew requests, Hill refused replacements. "They need to look broken," he insisted. The wardrobe department did what they could. Some items were cleaned, others were patched with duct tape. The result? Uniforms that didn't just look lived in, they smelled it. The actors reportedly dreaded putting them on, but on screen, the effect was undeniable. These weren't costumes. They were carcasses, and when your own clothing turns against you, you're not playing survival, you're living it. Fact Hasson 8. One scene was lit with fire and nearly sparked a disaster. In one of the film's most haunting sequences, the soldiers discover a mutilated body deep in the swamp. The air is thick, the light flickers. It feels like a ritual, not a scene. That's because it was lit not with bulbs, but with fire. A lighting failure forced the crew to improvise. With no working rigs and time slipping away, Hill ordered handheld torches soaked in kerosene. Actors carried real flames into waist-high grass. Shadows danced. So did the risk. During one take, a torch slipped. The flame caught dry moss. A boom operator stomped it out just in time. No injuries, no damage, but the adrenaline stayed. Hill loved the take. It remained untouched in editing. You can see it in the final cut, a sudden flash, a look of genuine alarm, then silence. That's not acting, that's instinct. And in this film, they were the same thing. Fact Hassonanen. The scene that was supposed to be terrifying made people laugh. There was one scene intense, raw, unfiltered, where a soldier breaks down, fires wildly into the darkness, and collapses into tears. On set, it was treated as a major moment. The actor went all in. The crew held their breath. The director whispered, "We got it." Then came the test screening. The audience laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly, but instinctively. Something about the timing, the performance, the framing, it didn't translate. What was meant to be terror came off as theatrical. Walter Hill was not amused. Instead of defending it, he removed the scene entirely. No discussion, no alternative cut. The footage was locked away and never spoken of again. The actor, reportedly devastated, called it the most committed performance of his career. Hill didn't disagree. He simply said, "If it breaks the spell, it doesn't belong." And he was right. In a film built on tension, one misstep could undo everything. That moment now exists only in rumor and regret. Because fear is fragile, and when the audience laughs, the horror dies. Fact #20. The original title was a question no one could answer. Before Southern Comfort became the title, the film was called The Enemy, short, stark, loaded. But as production went on, the question became unavoidable. Who exactly is the enemy? The Cajuns? The swamp? Each other? No one had a clear answer. And that ambiguity, once seen as depth, started making executives nervous. Marketing needed a hook. Hill offered none. Eventually, the studio renamed the film after a bottle of whiskey featured in a single early scene. It sounded warm, familiar, safe. Hill hated it. Southern Comfort sounds like a Hallmark movie, he quipped. But he never fought it, because in a way, it was fitting. A film about men chasing control, drowning in delusion and clinging to something soft while everything burned around them. The real enemy, it turns out, wasn't out there. It was the illusion that anything was ever under control. Bonus fact: a soldier vanishes off-screen and the film pretends it never happened. Some disappearances are loud, others slip beneath notice. In Southern Comfort, one soldier vanishes from the group not with a scream, not with a gunshot, but with an edit. Midway through the film, the squad's formation subtly changes. A face seen in earlier scenes is gone. No death, no dialogue, no mention, just missing. This wasn't a twist, it was logistics. The actor had to leave production early due to illness. Instead of rewriting scenes or addressing the absence, Walter Hill made a choice. Ignore it. Let the film move on. Let the swamp absorb one more soul without ceremony. The result? A creeping sense of erasure that fits all too well. In a story about confusion, mistrust, and fragmentation, what's more unsettling than losing someone and not noticing? Some viewers have caught it, most don't. But once you see it, the silence around it becomes deafening. Hill never explained the decision. The studio never acknowledged it. But maybe that's the point. In real chaos, people go missing, and the mission keeps moving. In this film, death isn't the end. Being forgotten is. If this journey into the swamp left you feeling uneasy, that's not a coincidence, it's design. Southern Comfort doesn't scream, it lingers, it doesn't answer, it dares you to ask the wrong questions. Which of these strange facts challenged your perception of the film the most? And more importantly, do you think this story was really about a training mission gone wrong, or was it always about something darker beneath the surface? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that were never meant to be uncovered.